A twister got her there. Todd's twisted mind got us here. Here's your relook at the McFarlane Toys McFarlane Monsters Twisted Land of Oz, Dorothy Gale. The McFarlane Monsters series Twisted Land of Oz is a highly detailed limited edition release from McFarlane Toys based on the classic novel The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. It features twisted alternate interpretations of the classic characters. I can understand why now Dorothy was so anxious to get home. Before, though, we get a closer look at Dorothy Gale and then whatever this thing is that's holding on to her, we're going to take the tape measure and we're going to see how tall the figures stand. Now, we are going back and we're re-looking at these again. Some of the questions I certainly get from you guys is, while it's fine and good to be looking at the current lines of products that we're getting from McFarlane Toys, it's always really nice to be able to go back and look at some of the twisted things that Todd was doing back in the day. You know, I really do hope, though, that as fine and good that we are getting the movie Maniacs, and of course now we're going to be losing the DC Multiverse line eventually, this would be certainly a fun time to go back and Todd to start doing things like this again. Because I think this was really the thing. I don't want to speak really for all the collectors. I know for myself, at least, this was really the thing that put Todd on the map. It was certainly, though, the Spawn stuff, but it was when he was getting into the Twisted Monsters line, that was really the stuff that I was getting really fully into. Again, we're going to be looking at the rest of the Twisted Land of Oz. I figured we would start things first, obviously first with Dorothy. Dorothy, though, has seen better days. She's missing, though, her ruby slippers. What she's gotten, though, instead, a ruby bodice, perhaps. And then, of course, she's being held onto by this tiny little dwarf. The tape measure is going to tell us. Now, again, like these figures are attached currently onto the display stands. If you were to just look at Dorothy alone, she's standing at about 6 3/4 inches in height. That translates, though, to a figure that's about 17 centimeters tall. Then to, I guess, would this be a munchkin? It looks to be like a munchkin, although it looks like a munchkin taken from the world of the Cell. He's actually on his own, is going to stand at 3.5 inches in height, or roughly about 9 centimeters tall. I'm sure she'd never see herself in this sort of predicament, but here's what the figure looks like with the Gal Gadot DC Multiverse. I think this was the Justice League Wonder Woman. One clearly, though, is a little bit more posable and taller in size. One isn't, more as a action statue, but at least it gives you somewhat of an idea. Here's also what the figure looks like with the dazed and confused David Wooderson. This would be one of the current movie Maniac stuff that we're getting from McFarlane Toys. Limited, again, on articulation, which, again, goes with the territory of what we're going to be looking at here with the Twisted Land of Oz. Again, like the original movie Maniacs actually had a little bit more posability. The stuff, though, when we were looking at the Twisted Lands of Monsters, whether it be Twisted Land of Oz, the Twisted Circus, any of those lines, none of them really had much in the way of posability. So, you know, you can't really say necessarily that I really wish that McFarlane would go back to the days of making articulated figures. Because the stuff that we're really getting here, essentially, with the Twisted Land of Oz, really didn't have much in the way of posability to start with. It was made available in the 7-inch scale that she's standing in now. She was also available in a 12-inch release. Very similar designs. We're going to kind of talk about what the differences was. I never really had the chance to pick up the 12-inch tall figure. I think right now, even the current prices of seeing what she's listed for online, about $200. I've seen one listing for about $179, one for $199. For that, and the fact I think she was the only Twisted Land of Oz character that actually got the 12-inch treatment, I don't know if I'm going to still pull the trigger and eventually get around to getting her. She does come with several different component pieces. Now, I haven't had these things on display for a while. And I was kind of really thinking to myself, oh no, if I'm going to be going back and looking at this line again, what will potentially be broken when I go back to these bags? The only thing that was actually broken, though, on Dorothy was her finger right here. Sure enough, though, as I was pulling the figure out of the bag, there was like a little linked sausage sort of rolling around in the bag. I thought, well, what's that? Then I realized her finger here had unfortunately broken. So a little bit of glue, although you can still see the seam line there where obviously the finger has just been glued in place. Other than that, though, she has held up generally quite well. The thing I was also really worried about, though, was the tiny little stick that the midget or the munchkin would be carrying around with him in his hand. I thought surely, though, I would be losing that. Don't call me Shirley. Luckily, though, I didn't lose it. So we're going to put Dorothy down here for a second. She really does rely on her display stand. She doesn't really do much of anything without that. We're also going to take the munchkin, move it off to the side, and we're going to look at least of what's left of the yellow brick road. I don't know really by now. It's much in the way of yellow. It's certainly a little more grungier. You can see that there's a couple of placed pegs. The pegs themselves work really only well for Dorothy, so you can kind of move her around. She does actually, if you look on the bottoms of her rather odd-looking elevator lifted shoes, she does actually have a peg hole right here and doesn't have one on the other. So you can choose to either have her over here, you can have her over here, but you can't split the legs to have her attached to both. If you think to yourself, oh, well, I'm sure, though, the Munchkin will have ball joints or peg joints on the bottoms of his feet. No, he does not. This thing that he's riding that looks a little like Freddy Krueger, he's not removable from it. And as the total package, no, not Lex Luger, but there is no peg holes on the bottoms of the feet. So this really can go anywhere. It doesn't really matter whereabouts you want to have it. I was actually having kind of Dorothy over here, I think, at the beginning of this review. Like I said, it doesn't really matter. But the display stand looks rather nice. Obviously, it would have just started here in the black plastic. It does actually look like a separate piece was attached when they came out of the molding press, just to kind of give you guys an idea of how old this is, 2003. Now, we're into 2025 now, so for those doing simple math, that's 22 years. 22 years tracking back would have been the release of the Twisted Land of Oz. Nice looking display stand, though. Like I said, though, Dorothy can attach onto it. If you look at her lifted boots here, I'm surprised actually there's no dead fish sitting inside of that. Remember that when that was a craze? I mean, that obviously predates me. But back in the day, during the disco days, there were like lifted boots where you could have like little goldfish in. I would imagine, though, the moment you start to walk, first that goldfish would get a concussion, and then shortly after that, it probably would have died. So you would have had these dead fish sort of floating around. That's such a morbid thought, but a thought that fits well with the fact that we're looking at the Twisted Land of Oz. For Dorothy itself, like I said, she can't plug into either one of those places. She just attaches here, or I guess kind of more on an angle this way, or you can also have it here. It doesn't really matter, again, necessarily. You can plug her into either place. The one thing about it, though, is that the 12-inch release of Dorothy Gale is going to have a little bit of a different type of display. It looks about the same, about this kind of diamond shape, although I think like the stones themselves are a little bit brighter of a yellow. And one thing that they've also added is a metal kind of sign on the back that says Dorothy. It looks like an old age kind of road sign. It says Dorothy, just written across the back of it. So that would have been one thing that would have been on the 12-inch release. Dorothy would have also gone through some substantial costume change, but the stand itself would, like I said, have been about the same. As for Dorothy herself, the 12-inch release of Dorothy is very similar in design. She has like sort of the kind of what's little of her clothing here available. She has the red bodice piece, or is it a halter top? I think it's a bodice, running around the kind of the abdomen area. The one thing, though, that would have been different with the 12-inch release is that she would have actually had a real tattered fabric skirt. I think like the boots were probably going to be about the same. Maybe like the boots were, I feel like they were probably like the same height to one another. Maybe she didn't have the thigh stocking on the one side. But notably, though, she would have had like the fabric skirt. Which is one thing, though, if you get the chance to get the 12-inch release. A little bit more expensive, yes, I know, everybody. But if you had the chance to kind of venture off and try to grab one of those, that's going to be mainly the difference between the two. The one other thing, too, about Dorothy, I just want to kind of bring this around, is that she does also have the key. Now, you can see, though, like that's sculpted in the way, so it's supposed to look like part of the Emerald City. I guess she's off to see the wizard, whether probably against her will or not. The sculpting on her face for a figure that's 22 years old looks fantastic. If you like the bondage look, not going to be a look I'm sure everybody's going to really love, but it's certainly something, maybe whether she likes it or not, it's unfortunately something that's been forced upon her. Of course, her face is completely wrapped up like this. If you have seen, though, just an underrated horror film, The Cell, starring Jennifer Lopez. I know a lot of people don't really like Jennifer Lopez. This kind of, when you start to look at the Twisted Land of Oz, especially the little midget, the little munchkin here, very much has this sort of vibe like The Cell. The face sculpt, again, really good on her. She's a little pale in complexion. She has the stitch line there up the front. Allotted for at least enough space for her ponytail to come out. Like this, Dorothy has a little bit longer of a hair. There is a little bit of posability in the sense that this is kind of a rubbery plastic. You can move it around back and forth if you want. Being that, again, this is an older figure, I just don't want to kind of tread cautiously. I just don't want this to break off. You can see, though, that, again, she's strapped off. I mean, she's sort of hanging out everywhere. Again, the color looks really good, though, on the front of the top. What little outfit that she actually has. You can see that if you wrap this around to the back, she's sort of bolted in place. There's a key lock right here. Now, I don't know if this lock actually works with this key. I mean, if that would certainly be the ultimate punishment. She has a way to free herself, but there's no way that she can get access to it because, of course, she's shackled on the back. This looks like it's been tied up. Again, there's a rope that wraps around this as well. And the thing that's kind of cool, too, is that the rope is real. And you can have that actually in the hand of the midget. Munchkin. Nicely detailed, again, like it looks like there's very little clothing here on the back of her body. I would imagine she probably didn't come into Oz looking like this. She's got some tattooing or branding there on the side. I would imagine that's probably been branding. This may have been the original tattoo that she started with when she got to Oz. This may have been a branding that was done by the Munchkin. Psst, ouch. The higher thigh stocking is only really on the one side. I do actually like that. It's a lighter color. They've added some nice darker airbrushing if you get your blasted hand out of the way, reviewer. And then she also has herself like, sort of like the, I don't know what you would call them, like the goth boots. Those are nicely painted as well. Relying a lot on the silver, where I would imagine underneath that would just be the regular black plastic, or probably like this color of plastic. They probably would have painted both. One stocking, as you can see, has been kind of folded down. The other one is still high up there. And again, she's got herself these little glitter boots. Those boots look fantastic. Nowhere, anywhere on this figure can you see anything that's ruby. Well, I guess really other than her top, and really I guess her lipstick is ruby there as well. She has no ruby slippers. So she couldn't even click these things back together and say there's no place like home. I have a feeling she's not going anywhere. So that's Dorothy. She doesn't really stand on her own. She unfortunately kind of leans to the side, so you may want to even, in fact, get her right away onto the display stand. We'll kind of just plug her in place just like that. So that's Dorothy. Let's look at the Munchkin now. I don't know if they represent the Lollipop Gang? The Lollipop Gill, I think that's what it is. You can see that there's two of them. Now, they come attached. There's no way that you can remove one from the other. I don't know if you were to look underneath this, if they're actually joined by other means other than just the saddle. I don't even want to think about that. Don't even want to think about it. One thing, though, that's interesting is looking at this and talking earlier about the cell. One of the main characters, the main baddie, as to why Jennifer Lopez has to even go into his mind in the first place. She has to find the whereabouts of the girl that's been held hostage. And of course, the water's filling up. Have you seen The Cell? It's a great movie. This looks certainly like something we would have seen from The Cell. Of course, he's got the horns there on the side. This one also comes with like a little, it's like a bridle stick. Horseback ride. I know very so little about it. But basically, this was one thing I really was worried that was going to get lost. Luckily, though, it was still sitting inside the bag. There's a hole right here, so you can take yourself the stick. I know, again, that's not really the correct term. We're just going to slide that in place like that. There we go. There's no articulation at all, by the way, for the Munchkin, nor for this one, nor for the one down below here that looks like Freddy Krueger. I don't know if he's getting the raw end of the deal just because he's the one that has to walk on all fours. He looks like he's hanging quite a bit of a gut as well. Very well painted, too, for a piece that's this old. Again, there's no holes on the bottoms of the feet, so there's no real way to plug this onto the display stand. Now, what you can do, displaying her, she has this rope, which we've already kind of looked at. The rope can actually fit in the hand of the Munchkin. So I'm going to just detach this right now. If you take yourself the rope sort of just wraps around the hand. And I kind of had done this earlier. It's a little harder, obviously, to do right now. But basically, just have the Munchkin holding Dorothy that way. And then he's just sort of carrying her around by leash. The other thing that I was doing initially, too, is that you can also take the hair. And the hair, because the hand is wide like this, you can actually have him even holding the hair. I don't know which would be less demeaning to the character of Dorothy, but you can have it displayed either way. I know most of the images that I have seen online, even though really the hand really does hold the ponytail quite well, most of the images that I have seen usually have the rope just wrapped around the Munchkin. Just sort of wrap it around like this. Intermingle it, kind of work it around the finger, and the Munchkin can carry around Dorothy that way. And then basically you just take your figures and put them on the display stand. Dorothy will need the actual peg. The Munchkin, again, won't. He's fine just to stand on his own. Yeah, you know, again, it's a nice looking set. One, though, that if you try to track one down now, this is kind of when we did the Twisted Christmas, the Twisted Xmas. It's a line, though, that if you were lucky enough still to have this in your collection, I was lucky enough still to keep these in my collection, then you can bring these out from time to time. And, you know, again, like looking at these, I'm surprised I don't have these on display. Maybe, again, like as we're losing the license. I don't really like the idea that we're losing the license for the DC Multiverse figures. I mean, truth be told, Todd was doing a fantastic job. Yeah, the sizing wasn't always really there. Again, like he was double dipping a lot on the molds. But I think really this is something there I would love for them to go back and reapproach the Twisted line. Do even more nursery rhyme characters, because they had done the Twisted nursery rhymes, and then they had done the monsters as a whole. They did the Twisted Land of Oz, which we're looking at in this review, and then of course they've also done like the circuses and stuff like that too. So there's a lot of cool stuff that hopefully, as opportunities pop up, I just happen to have a little bit of time on my hands. Certainly, though, the Munchkin had a little bit of time, and Dorothy on his hands. I figured it was a perfect time to kind of go back and start having a look at these again. It kind of gives me, first of all, a chance as well, too, to go back and look at this line. this was all the kind of stuff that I was doing very early into my YouTube tenure. I mean, looking at these old McFarlane stuff was really probably one of the things that got you guys looking at this channel in the first place. And I thought it'd also be a good time to go back and look at these again. Dorothy obviously would be the first character I'd really want to look at for the Twisted Land of Oz, simply just because, again, like, she starts her journey and then she finds, again, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. And maybe what I'll even do too is I'll look at them in that order. I have all the figures except for one. I don't have the flying monkeys. Still, it's a set that to try to track one now down, it's going for stupid money. Maybe I'll try to do one if I can find a set for a reasonable price, but still we're going to look at the rest of them. That also includes Toto and will include as well the Wizard. So, of course, those videos will all be coming your way. In the meantime, though, Dorothy, against her will, is a nice-looking figure to put on the shelf. Again, if you had, lucky enough, found the 12-inch version of her, very similar in design. Obviously, just the difference is really more so for the display stand and the fact that she wore a skirt. But I think the sculpting of her and the Munchkin were very similar to this one that we looked at in this review. Originally, Dorothy Gale included the Chapter 1 story of the Twisted Land of Oz. For how long ago I looked at this line and that I threw out those clamshell cases at the time that I first looked at the figures, I don't have that story available. I'm sure, though, if you looked online and looked up Twisted Land of Oz McFarlane Toys story, I'm sure as though somebody has posted the entire story online if you'd like to read it. If you find, though, that Dorothy Gale isn't decent enough, there was actually a variant released of her as well. Actually, that's one thing McFarlane has always really done from the beginning of time. Every time they've released figures, they usually have released variants of them, so it made collectors go crazy to try to track down every release of her. There was this one, obviously, that we looked at in this review. There was also a Dorothy that was released that looked like she had a black shawl or a dress over top of her outfit. Now, I would imagine, though, that probably would have still been fabric, so if you opened up that case, even though it's now more limited, you probably would have been able to take that off in the first place, and she probably would have looked the same underneath. For me, though, I only picked up the initial run of the figures, whatever was listing online when I first ordered these on eBay. For at least that, I've got all the figures except for the flying monkeys. I still want to get my hands on the flying monkeys, but what's the crazy cost that those monkeys are going to be going for right now? Dorothy Gale, though, is a fun-looking figure. I mean, if you kind of bought into what we were getting with the twisted stuff and the twisted mind of Todd back in the day, probably a lot of you guys collecting these were in the beginning were probably getting all the stuff that McFarlane was doing regularly. The Twisted Land of Oz. They also did the Twisted Fairy Tales. Yes, yes, yes. I've already done reviews on all of those, although with the time and how old those videos are, I wouldn't really recommend going back and re-looking at them. Now, I did recently look at the Twisted Xmas. I think that was like last year that we went back to look at this line again. I kind of want to do the same thing with the Twisted Land of Oz. If I can get around to it as well, I'd like to go back and re-look at the Twisted Fairy Tales. But we don't want to fast forward too far ahead. Obviously, we've only just started with the first figure of the Twisted Land of Oz, and also we're going to be continuing it. And I think what we'll do is we'll kind of continue it on with the way that the characters that she meets on the way to see the Wizard. So up next, we're going to be looking at the Scarecrow. It's funny, though, I say that the Scarecrow is going to be the next one because I always think that the Scarecrow is the weakest from this line. What do you guys think of the Twisted Land of Oz Dorothy Gale? Let me know down below in the comment section. Have you guys had the chance to pick this one up? Or are you also looking forward to me going back and re-reviewing these again? If you guys did enjoy this video, do it a solid, throw it a like. You guys want to stick around for more so? Yeah, I hope so. Hit that subscribe, turn on that bell, and of course come back. There's lots more videos coming your way, so as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.